we're mainly going to talk about slope. Some of this should be familiar from previous years. You probably have heard about some of this stuff, but we just like to refresh and make sure that it's up to date. So in the problem here, I kind of like to start off with this problem. It says these are two skateboard ramps, and they want to know which one is steeper. So both of them have a length of 20. So this one has a height of 15, and this one has a height of 12. So a lot of kids will look at this and be like, okay, well, obviously, if, since they're both the same at the bottom, the one that goes higher is going to have a steeper hill. So if you start at the top of this one versus the top of this one, you're going to have a steeper incline for letter A. So some things we're going to talk about is, what would you do if this was something different? Like, what if this was 18? Because then it's hard to tell because you have a longer base and a shorter height, but you have a shorter base and a longer height. So which one actually is steeper? So we can actually figure that out if we can calculate slope. So in short, slope is basically how much something, its height, divided by how wide it is. So what we'll see is on these graphs down here, we can make a triangle through 2 points, and then we'll decide, what's the left to right distance versus what's the up and down distance. So if I were to go up here, back to my example, let's say we have the 15 over 18 and the 12 over 20. So what you want to do is you want to take the height of the triangle, which is 15, and you're going to divide by the run basically means the left to right distance, the horizontal part, and that is 18. And you want to do the same thing for the other triangle. So if that one's 12 over 20. And then what I like to do is just divide those out and see what the decimal answers are. They're a little bit easier to compare. So if I do 15 divided by 18, I get 0.83 repeating. So we'll just round that to 0.83. If we do 12 divided by 20, we're going to get 0.6. So all you have to do is decide, which one's a bigger number? Well, in this case, it's 0.83. So this is a steeper slope. So the bigger a slope is, the steeper it is. So a lot of times we're going to be finding slope on coordinate planes because slope really helps us out with word problems, and it also helps us make predictions. But first we have to learn to compute it. So what you want to do is, kind of as a rule of thumb, I always look and pick a point that's on the left. So if you look at this picture, you have this point and this one's on the left. So I like to start at the leftmost point. So to get from here to here, I'm going to have to go up 1, 2, 3 spaces. So I actually like to write 3 here so I don't forget that. And then I have to go over or run 1, 2 spaces. So it's kind of like riding an elevator. You go up 3 floors and then you walk out 2 steps. That's kind of how I like to think of it. So your slope, and we don't want to forget we use M to show slope. M stands for slope. So our slope is 3/2. And it actually is usually best to leave it as an improper fraction. It makes it easier for us to graph if we need to graph later on. So if we look at letter B, this time the upper point is the left point. So I'm going to need to travel down 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, and to the right 1, 2, 3 spaces. So the thing you have to be careful with is I had to go down. If you notice, I said the word down. So I like to put -4 here. Negative means, hey, you had to travel down. And you still went to the right. Well, going right is a positive direction. So this time our slope is -4/3. Letter C, it looks like I'm going to start here. I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and to the right 1, 2. So 5 and 2. My slope is my rise, 5 over the run, which was 2. And then last but not least, we're going to start here, and we're going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. So we went down 4, and to the right 1, 2, 3, 4. So we also went 4. So my slope is -4 over 4, and then it's always good to reduce your fractions. So we're just going to make that a nice, pretty -1. So getting a slope on a graph is usually pretty easy. However, when we don't have a graph, or if we get ordered pairs, especially if one of your numbers is a fraction or a decimal, it's going to be really hard to count the slope and stay accurate. So we like to use our slope formula, which the nice thing about this is it's something you don't have to remember. It goes y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So that probably looks familiar from past years. And what this little triangle means is change in. So it's basically saying how high is it over how wide is it. That's what that little symbol means. So you don't need to get too freaked out about that. So what I always like to do is label my ordered pairs x1, y1, x2, y2. And it would have been okay if you called this x2, y2, x1, y1. That part doesn't matter. You just need to make sure your 2's are together and your 1's are together. So if I were to put these numbers into my formula, I would put 1 in for y2, 3 in for y1, 5 in for x2, and 2 in for x1. So I'm going to get -2 on the top and +3 on the bottom. And the good news is you can't reduce this fraction, so you would actually be done. So your slope is -2/3. So if you were to graph these ordered pairs, you would find that you would have to go down 2 spaces and over 3 spaces to get to the next point. So go ahead and pause the video, try B and C on your own, and then I'll post answers. If you check your answers with mine, hopefully you got -2 for letter B. Make sure that you're really careful. You really should be writing out -4 minus -3. And it's actually good to write the double negative because sometimes we forget that that really means addition. So that actually comes -1. And then letter C, my work probably looks different than your work, and I did that on purpose. I actually did y1 minus y2 and x1 minus x2, and I did that on purpose to show you a point. So if you did it the way that I think you did it, you got -2 over -3, or you should have. But when you have two negatives in a fraction, you really should change it to a positive fraction. So if you want, you can actually do y1 minus y2 as long as you do x1 minus x2. So if you put the 2's first, that's fine, but they both have to be first. Okay, so we're going to graph the pair 2, 3. So we're going to go over 2 to the right and up 3. And then -2 and up 3. And then we want to connect the points. And it says, what's the slope of this line? So what we're going to do is, if you're not sure what the slope is, because this one you can't really count rise over run, is we're going to go ahead and compute it. So we're going to do, let's do 3 minus 3 over -2 minus 2. And we should always be getting 0 as the top in examples like these. And 0 divided by anything is always 0. So the slope of this line is 0. So a little rule of thumb is this is called a horizontal line. And they're expecting you to make a conclusion. So if I drew the line here, or here, or here, or here, your slope is always 0. And we'll be working more with those kinds of problems a little bit later. Just, it's always good to keep those in the back of our mind that sometimes we get 0 slopes. And then we're going to experiment and plot 2 more ordered pairs. So 1, 1 is right here. And 1, -2 is right here. And we're going to draw actually a vertical line this time. And we're actually going to compute the slope over on the side. So we're going to do -2 minus 1 over 1 minus 1. And we're going to get something weird, -3 over 0. Now look what happens when you try to do that in the calculator. So we'll just do 3 divided by 0 because it's the same situation. 3 divided by 0. We get an error, right? It doesn't give you a number. It says cannot divide by 0. So when that happens, we have no answer we can write. We actually write undefined. So those slopes sometimes come up, and all that means is this slope is too steep to count. So in other words, if you were trying to measure the incline of this, well, you really can't because it doesn't ever go over to the right. It just stays straight up and down. So it would almost be impossible, actually, to run in that steep of an incline. So what's the slope of the line? We just write undefined, meaning we can't compute it. We'll always get this error kind of answer. So our conclusion is going to be, if you have vertical lines, no matter where they are, if it's a vertical line, you're going to have an undefined slope. So those are 2 types of slopes that we can get. The other type is a positive slope, and they rise to the right. So if it's a positive line, the right side will be higher. So they'll look like this. It might look not as high, but it's clearly still going, or it could be very, 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 very slow growing. Okay, these are all positive slopes because this side is higher. Lines with negative slopes will rise to the left, so the left side will be higher. So it'll look something like that. It could be kind of shallow like that. Those are all negative slopes. So I always tell my kids, when you read a book, you don't read on this side and go this way. You start on the left and you read to the right. So when I read a slope, I always pick the left side and I just see, okay, what's going on as I go to the right? Is it going up or is it going down? And that usually gives you your answer. So this one says you don't have to actually calculate the slope. You're just supposed to decide if it's positive, negative, 0, or undefined. So again, if I was to read this like I'd read a book, I pick the left side of the line and I read as it goes on. So this line is clearly going downhill as we go on. So my slope is negative. We just talked about vertical and horizontal lines, so we're just going to write undefined and 0. And then if I look at this line, again, you should always look at the left, see what's going on as we move to the right, and it is going up. So this will be a positive slope. The last type of problem we're going to do is we're going to switch up the slope formula a little bit. It says find the value of r so that you can use this ordered pair and this one to get this slope. So the first thing you should always do is set up your slope formula. So we would take negative 3 minus 6 and put that over 10 minus, we'll have to use the letter r because we don't know what that number is. And we should be getting negative 3 over 2. Now here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to go off on the side and write negative 3 minus 6 equals negative 3. Obviously, that doesn't even make sense. That's not even a true statement. That's because this is a fraction. So this top number could be anything. In this case, it's negative. It would have to be negative 9 because negative 3 minus 6 is negative 9. When it comes to fractions, you could get an answer of, let's see, 4/8, but that really becomes 1/2. So there are infinite things that negative 3/2 is equal to. So we don't want to just assume that the bottom, r has to be 8 because you got to get 2. That's not going to work. So it's just, you have to be really careful when you have a fraction equal to a fraction. You don't just set the top and bottom equal. Fractions don't work like that. Just because fractions can be equal to other fractions with different numbers. So the first thing I would do is I would condense the top a little bit, and I would make it negative 9 over 10 minus r equals negative 3 over 2. Now there's lots of ways that we can solve this equation. We can multiply both sides by 2. That gets rid of this fraction. And then we can multiply both sides by 10 minus r. That's fine. That's a little bit longer. I'd like to show you a quicker way, and it's going to be through cross multiplication. So the first thing you want to do is anytime you have more than one item, one term, I like to put in parentheses. So it's a good habit. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply these two items. So we're going to multiply diagonally. And we're going to write negative 3 times 10 minus r. Then you're going to bring down the equal sign. And now we're going to multiply the other two items. 2 times negative 9. And now you should be well equipped to go ahead and solve the equation. So we're going to distribute. Looks like we're going to need to add 30 to both sides. And then we're going to divide by 3. So our answer should be 4. So it's always probably a good idea just to go back and double check and make sure you didn't make a silly math mistake. And we're just going to try that and see if our slope does come out to negative 3/2. So if we plug it back into the very beginning, 10 minus 4 this time, we're going to get negative 9 over 6. And if you divide both of those by 3, we get negative 3 over 2. Oh, so that does check out. All right, so r is 4. So in general, always good to start up with a formula, and then you just have to remember the cross multiplication trick.